On today's Locked On Jayhawks, deep diving into Arthur Kaluma, the former Creighton player who is testing the NBA draft waters. Could he come out of the draft? Could he transfer? He's already in the portal. If he should decide to come back, would he make for a perfect fit at KU? Let's discuss.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Johnson. You can hear me as well on Rock Chalk Sports Talk, Monday through Friday from 3 to 6 p.m. on KLWN in Lawrence with Rock Chalk Sports Talk. Thank you for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get any of your podcasts. And you can also like and subscribe to us on YouTube. On today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, sorry for no show yesterday, but we'll do a Tuesday through Saturday this week. Arthur Kaluma, deep dive. I've been teasing at it for a little bit of time. He is the former Creighton player who entered the transfer portal while still testing the NBA draft waters. He just went through the draft combine, and now he just awaits his decision. The recruiting dead period will end on, I think, May 27th, so that would make it on Saturday. And then the deadline to decide what you're doing is like 3 or 4 days after that. So I would imagine certainly things are going to be speeding up here relatively quick with some of these guys that we're going to do deep dives on this week, from your Grant Nelsons and some other players. But we start with Kaluma this week. So where are things at? So Kaluma entered the draft process, as I mentioned, but also entered the transfer portal to keep his options open. And he entered the portal on the very last day, I believe, even just to kind of keep that possibility open. He's someone who you look at some different rankings in the pre-draft process, and it would probably lead you to believe, well, you should probably come back, but you never really know. Sometimes there's certain kids where like they're not even going to get drafted, and they know going in they're not going to get drafted, but they're just, if I get a two-way contract, like cool, or I'm ready to start my professional career. He's ranked 87th on ESPN's rankings, 53rd on CBS's rankings, and 55th on The Athletic. Now, those rankings were pre-combines. I don't know how any of that got affected. But something else to consider, when you're being projected as a late second-round pick, which for CBS and The Athletic, that is the case, a lot of times what ends up happening the last like 10, 15 picks of the draft is it gets muddled around because you'll get teams who take guys who maybe aren't in the top 60, but are willing to, hey, we'll stash overseas for a year in Europe where, you know, you can have me develop on somebody else's dime, or, you know, make a promise for me to be taken here because of the agency. I'm in the same agency as this free agent that you're trying to sign, or there's like some political stuff involved that a lot of times pushes some guys out of that range if you're in there. So it's kind of a dangerous space to be in, but you never really know what exactly you're looking for, what you're trying to get promised. Are you trying to get promised just a two-way deal? Because then at that point, if you're Arthur Kaluma, whether you get drafted or whether you're an undrafted player, you're probably getting a two-way deal. But do you contract? Do you want to come back and have the chance to kind of move your way up? All depends on the individual player. And it's easier to know that stuff with the KU guys who you've been covering all year, like with Jalen Wilson. Like, he's gone regardless, right? And he's seen as a higher second round pick than Kaluma. But with Kaluma, I don't know what the idea was kind of all year for him. So then he goes to the NBA combine and he measures 6'6" without shoes, 222 pounds, 7.5 wingspan, which is really good. He had a 32.5-inch standing vertical, 34.5-inch running vertical, 11.35 lane agility test, 3.25 shuttle run, and a 3.44 three-quarter sprint. And you might not really have a good reference point for what those are. Here's actually an interesting reference point to me. Arthur Kaluma versus Jalen Wilson across those measurements. So Kaluma is about an inch taller. He's about 3/4 of an inch taller than Jalen Wilson, but you know, pretty close enough. He also has a 4.5-inch longer wingspan. So clearly Kaluma is lengthier than Jalen. But he has a 1 inch better standing vertical. He has 0.5 inch less running vertical. So, I mean, you're kind of looking at similar guys. Kaluma just a little bit longer there. And then a lot of those running drills are very, very close. Like Jalen Wilson was 0.09 seconds faster in the lane agility. A lot of those are very close. So body type, I basically view Kaluma as a slightly less agile Jalen Wilson, but a better, a longer athlete, I guess. You get a little bit more dunks in there because of the length, even though the jumping is about the same. And then you look at it this way too. Jalen Wilson took a big step forward this year, but Jalen Wilson's first 2 years of play at KU, solid player, but 11.4 points per game, 44% from the field, 30% from three. Arthur Kaluma's first 2 years at Creighton, 11.1 points per game, 43% from the field, 29% from three. Those are very identical to each other. And I'm not necessarily saying that you can expect Arthur Kaluma in year 3 to have the same jump that Jalen Wilson did. And technically for Jalen, it was his 4th year of college, even though it was his 3rd year of play. But I guess my point is, like, Kaluma is a former top 50 recruit. If you look at his high school recruiting rankings, they're similar to what Jalen Wilson's were too. The measurements, some of the agility and the speed tests and the jumping drills were similar to Jalen Wilson. And then you're talking about a guy going into his 3rd year of play who had similar production in their first 2 years, who's looking to, become a more consistent 3-point shooter, just like Jalen Wilson was. There are a lot of similarities there to where I think if you're bringing on Arthur Kaluma, you can expect, again, I wouldn't necessarily expect to take the jump of what Jalen did to being a first-team All-American, but you can definitely expect, I think, Arthur Kaluma to take a step forward and be the best version of himself, as opposed to just the guy we've seen the first 2 years, which still is a quality player on what's been a really good Creighton team the past 2 years. Now, as far as where KU is at, I haven't really seen anything official about, KU reaching out, like any reports about, oh, this is that, or that they have a visit scheduled or anything like that. But I think you can certainly connect the dots. That it would make sense. KU's looking for a bigger wing. They could use somebody to fill those minutes. Arthur Kaluma is a good player. They've seen him up close and personal, and that it would just make too much sense. That I'm sure there has been some sort of contact. How deep they are in the weeds? Are there, other schools are ahead of it? Are there other schools that maybe have a better shot? I don't know. It seems like there's a lot of quiet there. Now, maybe that's because we are in kind of this recruiting dead period. And maybe also because of a slower timeline, because the combine was just happening. So, from his camp, he's probably focusing full-fledged on that side of things. Maybe his parents are handling the college recruiting. Maybe he's just focusing on the NBA draft thing, and there's like a lot of leaks involved in there, right? Since it's coming from the parents. So I don't know. But I would just assume if you connect the dots, it would make too much sense for KU to be very interested in him. And so I would imagine that they are, and that he is a real target. And I think any way you look at it, any way you dice it, he has to be one of the top probably 3 targets that's available to KU right now. And for some people, you would probably say number 1. For other people, maybe he'd be number 3, depending how you view guys like Grant Nelson or the Zion Pullen kid or Julian Phillips, who feels like kind of locked to stay in the draft, but I don't know. We'll have a Phillips deep dive later this week. Okay, we're going to get on to the scouting report for Arthur Kaluma, strengths and weaknesses. But first, this episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by Built Bar. Are you looking for a delicious snack, don't want all the sugar and calories? Then you need to try the best tasting protein bar ever, Built. If you're like me, you want to eat healthier snacks throughout the day, and you don't want to compromise on taste, right? You're used to going for a cookie or candy or something, that's not great for you. Well, Built Bar are perfect, because not only are they covered in 100% real chocolate, but they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and cookies and cream. They are healthy, only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait around to get a box. You can go to Walmart or Sam's Club. You can still order online at built.com for all your specialty flavors, but head to your nearest Walmart, head to the pharmacy section. You can get a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate bar, or coconut puff. Head to your nearest Sam's Club, grab a 13-bar box of brownie batter puff and churro puff. You can thank me later with Built Bar. On to the scouting report for Arthur Kaluma here, the strengths and weaknesses for him. So let's start with the strengths for Kaluma. High-level production in the Big East, which was the second best conference in college basketball for my money this past year. I think Ken Palm had it the same way. You had the national champion in UConn. You had some other really good teams like Creighton, Marquette, on and on and on down the list. Like UConn, who won the title mowing through everybody, finished 4th or 5th in the Big East. So it was a really good conference. You have high-level production there, so you don't really have to worry about, does it translate over to the strength of the Big 12? Like, They were in the next best conference. He averaged 11.8 points per game, 6 rebounds per game this past season. Over his first 2 years at Creighton, over 11 points per game, and also 2 years of double-digit point scoring at Creighton as part of that. He gets a lot of his scoring just by doing a bit of everything, which, going back to the Jalen Wilson comparison, is a little bit reminiscent there, right? Like, Jalen might hit like a mid-range shot, and then he might drive to the rim. Like, his bread and butter was driving to the rim. And I don't know that Kaluma has a bread and butter as reliable as Jalen's was with driving to the rim, but Jalen would get some in transition. He would hit the occasional three, right? Like with Kaluma, he just does a little bit of everything. He's kind of a jack of all trades in terms of scoring the basketball, to where you don't necessarily view him as being like, oh, he's Grady Dick. He's going to score 15 a game by just being a knockdown shooter. He's going to score 18 a game because he's just bigger and stronger than everybody in the post. He's going to score 20 every game because of his driving ability, or like a Devon Dotson. No, he just does a little bit of everything. He's solid enough as a cutter. He's solid enough at attacking closeouts. He's solid actually as a post-up guy. He knows where to be. He's not a great shooter, but he shoots it enough. It honestly is very similar to the first 2 years of Jalen Wilson. He can score a little bit in transition. He's just kind of found ways to get points and fill up the stat sheet at the end of the day. And you're looking for him to take that next step this year. But at the very least, he's a high floor player because of that, because he just found to kind of impact the game. He's also has a great ball fake. There was talk last year that you would hear from certain national people that the best ball fakes in college basketball, it was Arthur Kaluma and Sir Jabari Rice at Texas. I don't know how much that means, but I mean, it meant something. It created openings for Sir Jabari Rice all the time. So that's one way too that Arthur Kaluma can get open and help things out there with his shot fake ability. But a strong tournament performer as well. He's been somebody who steps up in those big moments. That would be added to the strengths here. In 6 career NCAA tournament games over 2 years, he has scored 79 points and grabbed 45 rebounds. That on average is over 13 points and 7.5 rebounds per game. So he's raised both of those numbers during NCAA tournament play when competition is at its most important. And best of all for him during that NCAA tournament career is his 24 points and 12 rebounds against Kansas in the 2022 second round. He went off in that game and almost led Creighton to an upset over KU. I mean, if not for KU getting Remy Martin back, they probably lose that game in large part because of Arthur Kaluma. So this is a player who has played really well in those big moments and in those NCAA tournament games, and specifically against KU, which, you know, if you look at it from the standpoint of, oh, who's the last transfer into Kansas who played really well against KU? Would that be Remy Martin? Well, that worked out for KU. So I don't know. Maybe there's something there. He's a good rebounder too. As I mentioned, 6 rebounds per game, 7.5 in tournament games. In Big East only games last season, he ranked 15th in offensive rebounding rate and 13th in defensive rebounding rate. Really good for a 4-man, especially when he's been playing next to a 7-footer in Ryan Kalkbrenner. So again, if you were able to add Arthur Kaluma to the mix of Hunter Dickinson, who's a good offensive and defensive rebounder, that's really good. And then KJ Adams is at the very least a good offensive rebounder. When you have your center out there, maybe that helps you with the defensive rebounding. So boom, you should have a good rebounding team. He's got good size too, 6'7", 220 pounds. And because he's a pretty good athlete, it gives you the ability, you can play him at the 3, you can play him at the 4 because of his size and kind of strength ability. And you can even get away with having him as an emergency center. I don't think that would ever be in the plan for KU to play him at the center. But in a world where KU is down on scholarships, having versatile players that can cover you and be an emergency player at a position is so crucial. So think about it this way. KU right now has Hunter Dickinson, Parker Brown, KJ Adams, all guys who can play the 5. And what happens if one of those guys gets injured and he's out for a week, and now all of a sudden another one gets in foul trouble? At that point, you're down to one center. Who would be your emergency center? Well, Arthur Kaluma can be your 4th center in that instance. They played Creighton did a very small sliver of minutes with Arthur Kaluma at the 5 this season. So he does have some experience doing that where he can be your emergency center. But pretty much all of his minutes would be logged at the 3 or 4. And right now for Kansas, you don't really have a small forward on your roster. You're looking for more guys to play minutes at those 3 and 4 positions. So it would be kind of a perfect fit for KU with his size and his positionality. He also has room to get better. He's headed into his junior year. He was the RSCI number 42 recruit in the country. Again, that compares, with Jalen Wilson there. So he's not some prospect, though, who came into Creighton as like a 3-star recruit and, he's just been having solid seasons and this is kind of who he is. No, like there's clearly room and I don't know, yeah, some recruiting backup there, some recruiting potential that you would think, yeah, he can take kind of a next step forward. It also means, as a part of that, with him being a junior, it's not just that this could be a breakout year for him, as we've seen so many KU players have, whether it's Jalen Wilson or Wayne Selden or whoever. It's also that means you could potentially have 2 years left to play for him. Now, I think ideally for him, if he's transferring in, he's probably going to try to do the Kevin McCullough or Jalen Wilson thing where he's here for 1 year and then he goes to the draft. But you still have that in the back of your mind. This was on his page from The Athletic with his transfer recruiting or whatever. It says he made only gradual improvements from his freshman season, but the idea of what he can become is still intriguing. Kaluma is a rangy athlete with good ball skills for his size. There's potential for him to be an all-league type performer and potentially a first-round draft pick. Not many guys can move like him with explosion and smoothness. He needs to be a more consistent defender and improve his jumper to get there. He's actually better shooting off the bounce than the catch. He was on a team with a lot of weapons, so the counting numbers may not look as flashy as some players with his talent on worse teams. He could play either forward position and fit into just about any scheme. All right, next part of this scouting report is not sure. I'm not sure about the defense. You heard there, the defense can be inconsistent. He ranked in just the 12th percentile on synergy in all possessions and in man-to-man on defense. That's not very good. However, his freshman season in 2021 to 22, he ranked in the 82nd percentile in both of those. So 1 year you have really good numbers on synergy. 1 year you have really bad numbers on synergy. Creighton was a really good team this past year and really the last 2 years, but a lot of that was because of Ryan Kalkbrenner protecting the rim. So I don't know that we have a great read on what Kaluma is as a defender, but if he can just be, I guess that shows right there, part of the scouting report that was given, he needs to be a more consistent defender. Well, boom, that shows it right there. He's just been inconsistent as a defender. He'll sometimes when he's good, sometimes when he's bad. If you can get that more consistency or just get him to be a consistently average defender, maybe that's good enough for you. Now on to the weaknesses. I think so far, spot up shooting. You heard that in the Athletic piece there. He shot 38.2% on off the bounce shooting compared to 30% off the catch, according to Synergy. He ranked in just the 16th percentile as a freshman in spot up shooting. He was 8 for 50, which was good for just 16% from three on spot up threes on their own. But overall, spot up shooting twos and threes, he was just in the 16th percentile. And then again, spot up threes as a freshman, just 16%. So not a good spot up shooter. He did improve as a sophomore, but still only to the 35th percentile in spot up shooting. And specifically on spot up threes as a sophomore, he went 22 of 74, good for just 29.7% from threes in those spot up occasions. So it's not somebody who's been a good spot up shooter, which ideally you would like that to be the case because you have a team with Hunter Dickinson and DeJuan Harris where they could spray it out to perimeter shooter who is spotting up and hitting those threes. Then again, he improved from 16% spot up threes to almost 30% spot up threes year one to year two. If he can take another jump to year three to 35%, 36%, maybe that's enough for you. Another possible weakness here, not super efficient, and this goes in line kind of with the shooting, just 26.5% from three as a freshman, 31% from three as a sophomore. If he does keep that uptick going, then you are looking at that solid junior season. Again, back to the Jalen Wilson comparison, 33, 34% on higher volume, but he has been kind of a streak shooter. Now, as a freshman, Kaluma was really good on 2-point shots. He was over 52%, but it dropped to 49% as a sophomore. He's not necessarily inefficient, but I don't think he's viewed as being efficient either, which again, that's kind of similar to Jalen Wilson. And then the last part of this, he can be boom or bust, goes back to the inconsistencies as a shooter, as a defender. And you see that reflected in the scoring totals game to game. Kaluma last season had 11 games with 14 or more points. He had a season high of 27 points against BYU. He also had 6 games of 7 or less points, including 4 games where he only scored 4 points or less. So you had some low lows, you had some high highs in there, and that's what you're going to try to refrain. But typically, you know, there's certain things that are and are not going to improve as you stay through college. Most often your athleticism, that's going to kind of be who you are when you come in. Like maybe you add some weight or something, but realistically, that's going to be about the same. Your shooting usually improves the longer you stay in college. Your consistency usually improves the longer you stay in college. Your defense might improve the longer you stay in college. So those are all good things to make you think he can make those types of jumps, because those are the things he's looking to make a jump in coming up. But as of now, those are some of the questions. All right, we'll finish things up with how he would fit in and kind of final verdict here with Locked On Jayhawks. First, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs, because right now new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back if your first bet does not win. You can bet on the on playoff Jimmy right now. That's always been a profitable bet. You can go bet on the same game parlay, Jimmy Butler over points, rebounds, assists, or combine it with some of the other players going on in the game, or, don't need to get fancy with it. Just bet on the Jimmy Butler over for points, or the Heat or the Celtics, and then you can bet on the NBA Finals with the Denver Nuggets awaiting after that. There's no better place to bet all the playoff action than America's #1 sports book. You paid instantly, it's safe and secure, and they have great promotions every day, including on Tuesday with Dinger Tuesdays with the MLB. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Finishing things up with this episode of Locked On Jayhawks with how exactly he would fit in. So he would come in, and I guess it would be decision time for KU. You could hypothetically start KJ at the 4, Hunter at the 5, and Kaluma at the 3, but I don't know if that's enough shooting. I think realistically, what I would expect is that Kaluma would come in and start at the 4, and that would move KJ to being your basically 6th man. I know typically we view 6th men as like guards who can come off the bench and just score for you. I'm just viewing it as like who's going to play the most off the bench. And I know you would hope that KJ Adams would not view that as a huge demotion or take it as a slight. He might, but here's how I view it. You have 80 minutes to divvy out between the 4 and the 5 positions. Let's say Hunter Dickinson plays 30 a game. Let's say Arthur Kaluma gives you, 28 minutes a game. You're still at that point left with 22 minutes to give KJ Adams. And if Kaluma's only playing 25 minutes a game, now KJ can play 25 minutes a game too, right? You can still get him a lot of minutes as both the combo of the backup 5 and the backup 4, that he's just kind of the super sub coming in. Maybe you even do fit out an extra 5 minutes where Kaluma is at the 3, KJ's at the 4, and Hunter's at the 5, just to get those guys a little bit more minutes. So you can figure it out and everything. Wouldn't be shocking if KJ did still start at the 4, but I think that would be kind of my expectation. And then, like I said, you would have somebody who could be your emergency 4th string center, which would give you a little bit of extra coverage there, and would also give you a small forward type. If you like, let's say you are playing Duke, and let's say Duke is rolling out a lineup of Mitchell at 3, Filipowski at the 4, and a center at the 5. Maybe in that lineup you can get away with Kaluma at the 3 and KJ at the 4, and so it gives you just more positional versatility. But I would mostly view Kaluma coming in as a 4 and probably being a starter at that point in time. Overall, the verdict here, obviously a take for me. You have 2 scholarships open. If you're trying to get one more impact player and just being like, oh, if we do happen to get a second commitment from a good player, we'll try to make it work. But I think he's definitely a take. If you're having to pick and choose, like hypothetically, if you were like, hey, we have either Grant Nelson or Arthur Kaluma, I think that becomes a more interesting discussion. But I think it's very clear to me that Kaluma is one of the best available players for you to go after right now. And if he's willing to commit and you can get him in tow, do it on sight and scene. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. We'll do a Julian Phillips deep dive. We'll also get to a Grant Nelson one later in the week. This has been Locked On Jayhawks. Find us wherever you get any of your podcasts or on YouTube. See you next